Welcome back to another episode of Followers by Design. Today we have Mr. Jeremy Mayhew.
Howdy.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Oh, splendid. I'm so excited for this.
It's been a long time coming.
Long
We've been
time
talking about this for a while.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
It's happening. You know what else is happening?
What's that?
Intro music.
So now it happens post-production.
That's a good song.
Oh,
Like that song.
wrote it myself.
Very nice.
That's right. Can you tell it only took me 15 minutes?
Very nice.
Thank you.
Welcome back, guys. So today we're going to be talking a little bit more about Jeremy's testimony and getting to know him a little bit more in his walk with Jesus and how his walk with Jesus has cemented him into the man that he's today and what he's appreciated more about his walk with Jesus. So, Jeremy, tell us a little bit more about yourself.
All right. Well, let's see. So I'm a husband and a father. You know, my wife and I just rolled over our 27th wedding anniversary. We celebrated by me getting a hold of some shellfish, and I have a shellfish allergy, so that didn't go very well.
That's right.
But you know, we're going to do it different next year.
That's right.
And we're going to do
28
it
is gonna be
very
great.
different next year. But, you know, I have 7 kids, so they're spread out right now all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got some in Europe, some in South America, some in Maryland. So they're just spread out. Gosh, I'm a software engineer. I've been writing code for 35 years or something like that. I'm a middle school director. I've been leading middle school ministry at our church for a lot of years, maybe 10 years, 9 years, something like that.
Wow.
Wow.
So it's one of my favorite things to do. My sense of humor is right there with them. You know, that middle school is right where my sense of humor stopped developing. And my wife will definitely affirm that as well. But so if you guys know me, and you probably think that I was born in Texas. I was not born in Texas. I was born in Georgia.
Whoa.
So that's one of those, you know, you have some fun facts at the end, but that's my fun fact right now. I was not actually born in Texas. I just got there as fast as I possibly could.
Okay.
So, but as far as my testimony is concerned, I was very much not. I grew up in Georgia and in Texas, you know, going back and forth, and had a great family. You know, it's a very atomic family. I had a sister, and that was it. You know, so we were just, you know, one boy, one girl, a mom and a dad, kind of upper middle class. My folks were pretty well to do as far as, you know, we had a nice house. You know, the last place that we lived at before my folks got divorced, it was just a wonderful lake house on Lake Conroe outside of Houston. And the thing is I was, the things that I remember about the time before my parents got divorced, there was always people around. My dad was amazing at networking and talking to people and stuff like that. And he was always bringing people to the house, and we always I had a lot of cousins and aunts and uncles and stuff like that actually weren't my cousins or my aunts or uncles. They were just, I just thought they were because they were always there, and we treated them like they were family. Just found out they weren't all Mayhews. So, but, you know, some of the best memories that I have of are, you know, with family and friends kind of gathered together, you know, and that was really, really good. I when I was in 4th grade, I remember walking through the school library, and there was a book laying out on the table that was something about how to cope with divorce. And I remember looking at that book and going, I'll never need to see that book. That's for somebody else. Well, after that year, that's kind of when my world changed quite a bit. My parents got divorced. I moved away to live with my grandparents, my mom and my grandparents, in a small town in the Panhandle of Texas, and that's where I grew up. After that was, I graduated from high school there, and that was a really traumatic transition for me. I was not ready for that, and I was very, very angry. Everything that I thought that I had, kind of just disappeared. We weren't very well off anymore. We were struggling, and there was, my dad was, he moved to the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and he was kind of trying to cope with the situation. We had some church experience. My folks went to a Methodist church every now and then. It was sort of a Christmas and Easter kind of thing. But when my parents very suddenly got divorced, there wasn't a lot that a lot of experience that my dad had that was good with the church and how that process went through. So I had a pretty bad taste in my mouth with the church and how things kind of happened. And then I was moving kind of into the belt buckle of the Bible Belt, and everybody's a Christian. And as I grew up, in junior high and high school, I didn't really fall in line with this sort of cultural norms for Christianity. And like, everybody's a Christian, everybody says they're Christian, everybody, prays before, meal and all of this kind of stuff. I just didn't, we didn't really do that so much in our family. It was sort of, we were kind of cultural Christian, and we'd go to church every now and then, usually holidays and stuff like that. But I was not impressed with Christians or Christianity or the church, and I felt like I needed to control things. When my parents got divorced, everything kind of felt like it was suddenly out of my control, where everything seemed so normal and under control up to that point. So I kind of reacted to that by just trying to control everything. And that was, I tried to control things by just being angry for a while. My mom tells many stories about me, getting angry, and she, when we lived at my grandparents' house, my grandfather had an anvil in the backyard. So big, like a blacksmith's anvil. Mm-hmm. And so she would send me back to the backyard and tell me to hit the anvil with a hammer. Mm-hmm. Until I wasn't angry anymore. And I would just keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going. And, sometimes she'd just have to come out and say, okay, stop. I'm not done yet, but stop. That sort of changed when I got into junior high and high school, and instead of an outlet for that was just anger, it became, what can I control? Yeah. And what can I do to be in control of my life? So what that wound up being for me was kind of an academic bent. I realized that if I could do well in school, get scholarships, be the best, then I would have some measure of control over my future. And so I wanted to do something really hard, and do something that, would require a lot of work, but a lot of control on my part, to just do it. So I had kind of set my sights. I was, I think I grew up with a lot of stories, and even though I started to really kind of see myself as an agnostic or an atheist. Usually an agnostic. If in my honest moments, I never said God didn't exist. I always had sort of a sense of mystery and a sense of things that we don't see still exist. And part of that was, I think I read a lot of stories as a kid. But the things that, affected me a lot, my aunt gave me a copy of the Chronicles of Narnia, and I loved those books and read them multiple times. I read The Lord of the Rings over and over and over and over again. And I think that cemented in me a sense of mystery, and that there were things, even though I didn't really understand much of what I was reading, as far as being allegory in the case of the Chronicles of Narnia and pointing to Christianity in any way, I did have this sense that there was mystery, but that actually kind of scared me a little bit because it wasn't something I could control. So I set myself to control everything I could. I became, the valedictorian in my high school class. I, drove my teachers nuts because an A wasn't acceptable. 100 was acceptable. And, so I would go through like math classes and make sure that I didn't miss a problem for the year.
Yeah, that's the opposite of me.
Yeah.
I was well okay with a C. That's fine. C's get degrees,
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. But that wasn't me. I had to control everything.
Mm-hmm.
So, as I, moved along, I was very successful. Got great scholarships. I had several schools that gave me full rides when I got out, and I wound up going to Texas A&M. It was a strange decision. I'm not sure what led me to make that decision because I had a lot of other schools that were interested, and I'd never gone to Texas A&M. I didn't know anybody at Texas A&M. My parents didn't go to Texas A&M. I just decided I was going to go to Texas A&M, so that's what I did. Got through my freshman year, and everything was going really well until it wasn't. Mm-hmm. When it wasn't, that's when the control started to move toward fear and anger again, because I wasn't all these things that I was trying to control. I started to realize I couldn't control, and there were things that I couldn't control. As I came back, I think it was after my freshman year in college, I came back to my hometown to work for the summer, and that was important because I needed the spending money and stuff like that. But full ride didn't cover CDs or anything like that. So, but I ran into kind of a series of unfortunate events. My grandfather, who I was close to, as my dad was no longer with us when my parents got divorced, and so that was even though he wanted to be there, he wasn't able to be there. So my grandfather and Optimus Prime, I think, were kind of my father figures for a lot of my growing up. Throw G.I. Joe in there too, I think, but
Trifecta.
Yeah. So I was really close to him. He had a heart attack, and it was a pretty bad one. He had, I think, that was quad bypass. That scared me a lot, and that was sort of me starting to wrestle with, okay, that's not something I can control, really. And that's threatening what vestiges of those things that I remember that I loved so much before my parents got a divorce and everything, was that family and the feeling of belonging, and then he could be gone. I was also in a car accident that summer. I was sitting at a stoplight and was rear-ended in this big old Woody station wagon. Got rear-ended by a semi-truck going about 45 miles an hour while we were at a complete stop. Just crunched it like an accordion, and my mom, my sister, and I managed to just get out of it with mainly bumps and bruises, not even any broken bones.
Wow.
But it was terrifying.
Yikes.
And And then I got a serious ear infection while I was working that summer, and wound up losing my job over it because I had to be out of work for a while. Lost my hearing. I was stone cold deaf for about 10 days or so. Just because of the infection and stuff. So there were a lot of things that were happening that just shook up that whole paradigm of wanting to be in control of stuff. So what happened then was really strange to me at the time, because it came out of left field for me. We had, like I said, we're in the belt buckle of the Bible Belt, which means I had a Bible. I had received it as a Christmas present, and it had my name in the front of it and everything. But it also sat on the shelf and was not read. I had been to church a couple times, but I wouldn't have been able to tell you what the gospel was, except for one person that I really recall actually talking to me about the gospel. And that was a man named Varghese Thankachan, who was a missionary to northern India, that my best friend John Mark, his parents were supporting his ministry as he was a missionary in North India, and he was in the United States for a little while, and I got to meet him at their house where they invited us over for the hottest curry I think I've ever had in my life, and he was talking to me over dinner and kind of talking about the gospel and the gospel ministry that they were doing in India. And then afterwards he walked up to me and he said, you don't believe what I was talking about. Not asking me a question. He was just observing. You don't believe it. I'm like, no, I really don't. So I'm going to pray for you. And that was, I thought that was cute, actually, but not, it wasn't until later that I realized, how profound and important that kind of moment was. But I found myself that summer and sort of everything kind of shaken up, and I walked in to my bedroom. It was about 3 a.m. one night, and in West Texas, you're not doing anything good at 3 a.m, but that's what I was doing, is, coming in at 3 a.m, and my Bible was laying on the floor in the middle of my bedroom. Still to this day, have no idea who put it there or how it got there or anything, but it was there. And I walked in and I looked at it, and I sat down in my desk chair and picked it up, and I just threw it open and started reading it. The first thing that my eyes fell on was 1 Corinthians 13, which is a poem about love that the Apostle Paul wrote. And it had the opposite effect of what was intended for the audience, I'm pretty sure, on me when I read it. Because I read it, and I got to a point where it talked about the clanging cymbal. And that image just stopped me in my tracks, of a clanging cymbal that makes a noise, and then the noise just tamps out and it's gone. And that was sort of like something snapped, and I just really felt that was, at that point, I said, what is the point of this? What is the point of what I'm doing? And so Paul's greatest love poem made me suicidal, made me start thinking about ending it all. This is just, there's no point in this. All the work that I've done doesn't get me anything in the end. It's just a waste. It's a clanging cymbal. Now, but the interesting thing there was I kept reading, though. I didn't have anything else to do, and I cried for a little while, and then I just started reading from where I left off, and I read the rest of 1 Corinthians 13, and I read 1 Corinthians 14, and I was like, this is weird. I don't know what this stuff is. If you read 1 Corinthians 14, you'll understand what I mean. But then I got to 1 Corinthians 15, And Paul makes a statement that I delivered to you as of first importance, this gospel. And then he lays out what that gospel is, that Christ died for our sins. And that was another point. So I went from suicidal ideation to, wait a second, what if this is true?
In the span of minutes?
This was probably in the span of an hour.
Wow.
And I had never given serious thought. I'd sat with my buddy John Mark and stared at the stars and talked about all kinds of questions and things and speculations and what happens when we die, and are monsters real, are demons real, or things like that, but more from a mythological sort of perspective. And this was the first time I kind of settled in and said, okay, what if this is real? And I read it over and over and over again. And then I realized that this could be true. And then thinking about what that meant. And what happened to me at that point was really, the best way I can describe it is that Jesus became a real person to me, not an idea or a philosophy. And he was there, and the Holy Spirit was there, and God the Father was there. And what that meant in that moment is that the thing that I had wanted as a kid, this family and this feeling of belonging and safety, and it wasn't even my control, because I wasn't in control of anything when I was in fourth grade. But I felt safe, and that's what I was really wondering about and really trying to get. And this was the first time that I actually experienced that. And this was not just, okay, Norman Rockwell, we've got a, family gathered around the turkey at Thanksgiving, but a much more profound togetherness, of finding a family again. And so that was a radical turning point for me. So it was really an overnight, and a lot of people don't have that experience where it's just an overnight, I can say that's the moment. I did have that, and I started to really wrestle through a lot of things in light of that. But the big thing at that point was I realized that I didn't have to be in control. And that isn't what I really wanted anyway. What I really wanted was family and safety, and a place and a people. And so that was a turning point where everything before was different than everything that was after that.
So once that happened, obviously it wasn't that your life just became perfect and everything's all dandy because you believe Jesus now.
Yeah.
You went from struggling with your pride, with your power, with wanting to be in control, and that shifted to a different perspective. And what was that different perspective? And what struggles came along with that, and what did you really have to work through?
Yeah. So, so I don't, if you've seen the Avengers or you've seen Firefly or some of these, Joss Whedon is a guy that was the producer and director and writer, and he talked about what made those things click with people was this idea of a found family. people coming together that aren't really blood, but are more than that. I think that was one of the things that I started to understand at that point, was that I was entering into something that was permanent and different and also safe, but also kind of dangerous, because I started to get pulled away from the things that I wanted to do and to have a different kind of consideration of what does God want me to do, asking different questions. So it really realigned my philosophical grid of understanding everything, where it wasn't just like, okay, how can I capitalize on this and be in control, but how can I be with God and be with other people and help other people be with God. And those were things that I'd never thought before. Those were not in my repertoire at all up to that point. I don't know if I answered your whole question there, but what part of it did I miss?
Well,
Liquid Death product placement.
Not sponsored.
Well, hopefully, no.
Well, I guess to answer the rest of the question would just be to share every second of the rest of your testimony in the next 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
No, so you found your solution, right? You didn't have a family that was your foundation anymore.
Yeah.
But then you found the ultimate foundation in Jesus.
Yeah.
So then shifting your mind toward that and going and living that out every single day obviously has new challenges and new ways of life and just changing your perspective. So how did you end up doing that, and how is that still affecting you today?
Yeah. So I love stories. I love stories. And if I think about my story and maybe couch it in terms of maybe the way that the story of God is told, the story of God kind of follows this, there's creation, there's the fall, there's redemption, and then there's a restoration. So in a sense, the creation in my story was that the sense of experiencing goodness in my family. And the fall is not bad things happen to me, either, the bad things of a divorce or the bad things of, car accident or something like that. But it's the bad things of realizing how things actually are for me. That fall of, facing the reality of life without God. So redemption being that point where I see that there is a family for me to be a part of. That's the heart of the gospel, is that or the result of the gospel is that those who bend the knee to Jesus, those that follow him, are part of that found family that he's finding. And so then that process of redemption leads to restoration. And that is where I'm at right now. And that is a long walk. There were a lot of things that kind of cemented in me in the way that I think about things and do things. For example, a way of thinking about life apart from the truths that God is good and that God is for us and that God wants a relationship with me. When I'm not thinking about that, then I will naturally go to, I need to grasp for what is good, and I need to control. And so that's a continuous a continuous walk of trying to understand, okay, what am I grabbing a hold of right now? What am I doing that is grasping at control, not trusting God, not thinking about what his story is and where I'm at in that, but, kind of making myself the star of the show. Or, I'll give you an example of, there was I have been an engineer, doing lots of different things in my career. Built missiles and spaceships and all kinds of stuff. But that's, lots of really cool stuff. But I realized also that I thought a lot more highly of my abilities than I should have. I spent a lot of years living off of maybe 3 or 4 hours of sleep at night and cramming as much productivity into my day as I possibly could. And in a lot of ways, I thought that was honoring God. And there was a long process, about a 15 or 20 year process actually, from being a Christian to getting to finally facing the truth that I am finite and that I can't do it all. And God brought that about through suffering.
And humbling.
It was very humbling. So
sometimes we learn through hitting the wall.
That's right.
Rather than just being like, oh, there's a wall there. Maybe I shouldn't hit it.
Yeah. Well, I hit that wall. I hit it real hard, and it was called anxiety and panic attacks.
Yeah.
Something that I thought was a figment of people's imagination up until the point that I suddenly imagined one. And realized it wasn't really imagination. There was a physical reality to it, and it was hard, and it was painful. And it was partly of my own doing. I had agency in it to get there. And I will tell you this, at the point of seeing that, understanding that, there was, I went from being very, very productive to barely being able to get out of bed, barely being able to go to work. And this was not a short season of life where this happened. I had to drop everything. I had to pare down to the bare minimum of just surviving and making, putting food on the table and keeping my job and stuff like that. And that was really hard. That was really humbling. But something amazing happened there in that God met me in a much, much more tangible way, experiencing peace. Because it caused me to let go of a lot of things that I still, even after experiencing God and experiencing the goodness of being part of the family of God, I still held on to this need for control. And it'll still creep up on me if I let it. If it, it'll still be there. But through that experience, even though I wouldn't wish it on anybody and wouldn't want to repeat it, I also wouldn't want to trade it. Because what happened through that process was it sweetened and simplified and brought my relationship with Jesus much more intimate, much closer, where I looked forward to praying and talking and listening and just being far more than I'd ever experienced up to that point. It's one of those things where, sometimes you scratch your head about, people kind of get saved every week or every month or something like that, and they just kind of keep feeling like, okay, now I'm really saved, or now I'm really saved, now I'm really saved. And I think that the mistake can be made of just, because there's so much more to our relationship that we get to grow into through that restoration process, being restored to the likeness of Jesus, which is also discipleship, by the way. When you guys, I know you guys love that word, but being a disciple of Jesus, being formed into the likeness of Jesus, to look more like him, that process is so is truly unending. You know, there is no end to it, and there is continuously more that we can kind of walk into to understand what that means. He has a lot more for me. He has a lot more for all of us as we follow and as we are with him, rather than just under him or by him, but with him. And so I think I continue to walk that whole process out. Recently, I have really enjoyed. I'm working through a book by Dallas Willard called "Hearing God," and it's about developing a conversational relationship with God. Which there's definitely been times in my Christian walk where I thought, okay, that's crazy, hokey, charismatic, hocus pocus kind of stuff. Having a conversation. What is that? That's it. But it took me a lot of years to get to the place of deepening relationship where this is something where it's like, okay, this is what Dallas is talking about. This is what I want, and this is what God has for us. And this is the kind of relationship that God wants to have for us. That found family relationship is it's real.
Yeah.
And he is there. And so just like he was there that night in a way that I never expected or anticipated, he continues to be there. And so that has, just like, I said that, the point where I read 1 Corinthians 15, everything before that was different than everything after that. And it's because I understood that he was there.
Yeah. And now, through your walk with Jesus, you've experienced so much so far from that point of turning where God met you there in your dorm.
Yep.
Till the point where you're at today. And kind of my question is, throughout this walk, what has been something that God had made you passionate about that you've experienced, and then that has cemented in your walk and then shifted your walk towards like, oh, I'm really passionate about this. I want to share this with other people.
Yeah. So this, God was at work doing this before COVID struck, but during COVID, this is where God really brought me to a place of thinking about, kind of this idea of found family, that, what does it mean to live together as a family with people that aren't your family? And what is it, that is the paradigm of Jesus, having meals together, walking together, spending time together, thinking through things together, experiencing life together. And so in the last few years since COVID, COVID was a big pause button that allowed a lot of people, but to kind of do different things for a while. For me, it was a reset to go, okay, what is important? And if, and what is going to be resilient beyond whatever crazy thing, COVID or anything else happens. And that the idea that that the model and the pattern of being a disciple is to live as a family together with other people in God's family, and to have shared experiences together, around the dinner table and in our homes, was so foreign to us in a lot of ways before that point, where we were just kind of like, our home is where we go and sleep and do stuff, and then we go out and go to church and other things like that, but that really where the action is at for me to grow and for others to grow and for us to do it together is to do it in our home, and to do it as a family with people not necessarily their blood relatives, but are the people that God has brought into my life. We had pandemic potlucks in our front yard.
Those were good.
Yeah, you were there.
Mm-hmm.
You were there. I think, you weren't around for those yet,
Not
right?
yet.
Yeah.
Not yet.
But
It took me 1 or 2 years before I started
yeah.
showing up in the picture.
So those pandemic potlucks were when our 10 to 50 people showed up in our front yard, depending on what the current regulations were, or maybe in spite of what the current regulations were for most part. But and we broke bread together. We enjoyed each other's company. We talked. We studied. We sang a little bit. We had really good food. Fired up the grill. Had funerals for pets. All kinds of things that we did during those times. And that has left a mark on me that I will continue to pursue, because that is a formative model that is simple, and it's really, I think, what God intends for us to, the pattern that he intends for us. And I know that because that's the pattern that Jesus followed. He ate meals with people, even sinners, and he went places with his disciples, and he did things with his disciples, and he lived life with them. So most of his ministry was not the Sermon on the Mount. It was walking from here to there, and with the guys that tagged along with him. And so that's the kind of found family that I want to keep finding. And so that's the sort of a big paradigm shift that's happened to me in the last few years.
I want to say, like, it's not only has marked you, but it has marked a lot of people, because I know when people think about the Mayhews, they just think about a place where they can just show up and have community. Like, your house is characteristic of, like, always having so many people in there.
Yep.
And not just the 9 of you.
Not just the 9
so
of us that
more.
lived there, but
Yeah.
So many
yeah.
more. Sometimes even more that it should be fitting in there.
Yep. That's right.
But it has brought so many good memories. Even for me, it has brought so many good memories. Even that I haven't been there so much, but your family has been a characteristic of, like, opening a huge community towards me. Your family was one of the first families I've experienced community with here when I moved here.
Yeah.
Especially with working with one of your kids.
Yeah.
That opened up the whole picture of the community that I'm at right now. And I can definitely see that aspect of, like, your family wanting to form community and family outside that nuclear family that you guys have.
Yeah. Yeah. In a lot of ways, it relates to just the things that I saw when I was a kid, though.
Yeah.
My dad, having people over that weren't aunts and uncles and cousins, but I thought they were. And so he was modeling that to me before he or I could even fathom what that could possibly look like.
Yeah.
So
That's awesome.
yeah.
I think that's a perfect time to end the episode. It's been lovely to have you.
Cool. Yeah.
Thanks for coming on. Again, this was a long time coming,
Yeah.
but we made it happen. So thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, thank you all for tuning in, watching if you're watching, but thank you everybody for listening. We had a great time. I hope that you got something out of it. And we'll see you on the next episode.